So we were discussing the other day about themes, which is commonly translated, well, it's the Pali word is nimitta, which I usually use the term themes.
Right.
But it's signs.
Signs and features, signs and tokens, characteristics.
So, but we'll just use the English word themes.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't quite correspond to nimitta, but it's certainly related.
Yeah. So I'm interested in that idea of developing certain themes, so as to, for calming the mind. So there's that a sutta that says, develop samadhi nimitta.
Right.
The theme of composure.
Right.
In the morning, in the afternoon, and at night.
Right.
So you have to take a particular theme and develop it, maintain it, a whole day.
Yeah. Well, in that sense, theme it's a good word, good practice as well. It's what I was referring in some previous talks as context as well.
Context, yeah.
Yeah. So establish your mind upon a certain theme doesn't mean you hold that theme as some sort of mental object. It means actually you discern it as a basis in form of a context, as a basis for your action. So you want to develop theme that was going to again give the overall mood to your experience or direction towards your experience. So if your theme
gives direction, I like it.
Yeah, exactly. It directs. That's what I mean. Context, like context already. Oh, so these actions are against the backdrop of a certain context. So if that context is context that's free from greed, free from lust and desire, free from aversion, free from distraction, means no particular actions would be able to partake in that nature that this context is free from. And that's where that responsibility, that's why I mean it's not a meditation object that you just sort of ponder on. It's something you need to actively think about, establish it, and then it's effortless. Then you only need to maintain it. And that's the basic practice of mindfulness done correctly.
But rather than doing things which you think are free from anger, free from lust, free from delusion, I'll do these certain techniques, or these movements. I'll say nice words.
That's looking at the opposite direction of the context, of the theme.
In hope.
You are looking, if I go through these motions, I will somehow evoke the theme I'm supposed to have. But the only way to truly establish a theme is to discern what that theme is. So by dwelling on the context, on the nimittas, the characteristics of the context, you get to familiarize yourself with the context is, and then you see that your particular behavior is under the influence of the context that you established. So if your context is context of constant careless sensuality, careless speech, means your actions will be reflecting that context. It will be directed by the context, by the theme of carelessness, by the theme of lust and greed. But if you just hope to mechanically induce it, it won't work, because again, all you are focusing on is the particular actions. So although you're softly spoken and moving very slowly, and you're just emulating what you think should be coming out of the context of calmness and context of non-ill will. But if you actually get the context, you don't need to waste any effort emulating it, because you have it.
Yeah.
Why would you be pretending it to have it when you have it?
You can't get the context.
And then, even if your actions don't necessarily mirror what you thought you should have been acting like from the context of non-ill will, you know there is no ill will, because you discern the context of non-ill will. You haven't just blindly emulated and went through the motions and techniques of non-ill will. Same with loving kindness, same with anything. And that's why mindfulness, if done rightly, results in wisdom. Because see, you have to discern the context. You have to understand the context, the theme. Same with jhanas. That's what the Buddha say. If a monk doesn't, if he doesn't dwell, if he doesn't invest effort in developing the theme of jhana, which means he already has discerned the theme, but now he needs to invest the effort and develop that theme. If he doesn't do so, he's like a mountain cow that, as soon as it steps on one stone, thinks about the next and doesn't get stable on any and falls in between. So even with jhanas, even with samadhi, with composure, you actually want to develop the theme of composure. Discern it and then develop it, which means You mustn't overshoot the mark, nor must you undershoot it, so to speak.
So, for example, the developing a mind of loving kindness, you could take a course.
That's alright.
A bit sunny.
Yeah, I think it's going to come behind the branches soon.
So developing a mind of loving kindness, you could go on a course. You think, what does a person look like, or what does a person with loving kindness do? Well, he's softly spoken. People like him. He speaks gently. He's good in communication. So then you decide, I will take a communication course in non-violent communication, so that I can develop this special mind of loving kindness. And so you do this course, but failing to see that you have ill will. You don't have a mind of loving.
Even if you don't necessarily have ill will, as long as you don't discern the phenomena of the theme of loving kindness, means all you're going to be doing is focusing on the particular aspects of your behavior. And they should be coming out of loving kindness, not inducing loving kindness. It doesn't work that way. So, if you dwell on someone's behavior and discern certain traits so that you can understand the context behind, that's fine. But it's when people don't look behind, they don't look peripherally to see what gives meaning to these actions. They just hope, if I go through the motions of these actions, I will have the same result as this other person that is seemingly acting out of loving kindness. And that's a wrong order of things. And that's why those people will struggle then reconciling like certain behaviors of an arahant that don't fit with their preconceived notion of how arahant should be mechanically acting. And those are the cases in the suttas. When the Buddha said, no, he might have been roughly, speaking roughly and so on, but things that arahant can't do are things of sensual nature, things of ill will, but all the other things can be also attributed to various habits. And those are not the criteria. So the little ritual, little kind of patterns of your behavior, and if you're investing effort in that, means you don't know where the problem is. The problem is you being bound by the context of ignorance, bound by the context of lust, aversion, conceit, self-centeredness, bound by the context of upadana, context of assumptions. And because you don't see that, you think that refining your behavior and learning how to speak slowly and walk slowly, you're somehow contributing towards purification. You're not. You're actually trying to deal with the problem where problem isn't. Like speaking harshly and so on are usually the symptoms of the problem of the context of ill will. But if you just keep refining the symptoms, all you do is basically refabricating the way the ill will re-express itself. It's going to find some other way of expressing. As in, imagine a person speaking very softly, but like fuming on the inside. But if you actually, that's why the Buddha never told about, you go around and sort of deal with this or deal with that. He would always refer to uprooting the problem. So you uproot it, then you don't have to deal with any of these little things and manifestations of it, because there's nothing fueling it, which means they cease to be the symptoms.
So that's the thing, you don't have to develop these physical skills.
No, as far as development of physical skills goes, it's the Vinaya, Sila, 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 precepts, whatever you're keeping. That is the physical emulation of certain behavior. Non-ill will, non-sensuality, not lying, not stealing, not killing, not cheating, and so on. But everything else, on top of that, will only be right if it's seen from the point of view of the right context, of the right theme.
But if you realize that the work is there in the mind that you need to sort out, cleaning the mind, a lot of you can save yourself a lot of time.
Oh, you can save a lot of time and a lot of effort as well. And also, one of the reasons why practice is so difficult for people is because they don't know what to do. Like people deep down inside don't really know what to do. So they have faith, and then if I do this meditation, if I do this technique, if I go through these motions, their faith is going to result in something. But deep down, they don't see a connection between doing this and wholesome, doing this and unwholesome. which means they don't know skillful is skillful, unskillful is unskillful.
But isn't it the case that you need to know what you want?
Yeah, exactly. How can you develop it if you don't know what you want, really? Yeah. If you don't know what you're supposed to develop, you can't develop it.
So if you want a mind of loving kindness, you need to have
understand what loving kindness is.
You need to have a vivid image of that.
So when a person, like the example you gave, when a person has the idea, I want to have a mind of loving kindness, instead of taking their vague, ambiguous, not developed notion of loving kindness for granted and then just try and emulate what loving kindness is in their mind, they should start questioning what they think loving kindness is. That's how you develop it. You don't develop it by going through some set of magical performances and motions. You develop it by understanding it, by purifying your understanding, by clarifying your understanding. So if you have a thought, I want to have a mind of loving kindness, so I must speak slowly and smile, and no. I want to have a mind of loving kindness, I must understand what loving kindness is. When I do, I will know how to protect that theme. I will know how to protect that theme. I will know how to advance it, how to develop it further.
How to protect it.
Exactly. And that's that verse. Is it loving kindness? It is. It's in loving kindness chant. He protects his mind like a mother protects her only child.
To protect that higher mind, that sign.
Protect that sign, protect the theme, the notion of the context of non-ill will. You start developing it, you protect it. So which means by developing the context, you already know what behavior is compatible with it, what behavior isn't.
But isn't it the case that theme is developed and held, maintained? You don't have to worry about your actions,
exactly,
so to speak, because that's where your actions are flowing from.
Yep. That's what I mean. You will have confidence then, once you start discerning the theme correctly, practicing mindfulness rightly, you will have confidence to know I don't need to police my behavior as long as I police my mind.
Yeah, protect that.
Police the root of my mind means nothing bad can happen. Nothing bad that I can do. Impossible. Impossible.
Because if a situation arises, a bad situation, someone steals something from you, but you've been protecting that mind of loving kindness.
Yeah, means you don't abandon your context because the priority of that which has been stolen from you is more important. No, the mind is the most important. The context is the most important, which means everything else is second. Which means whatever befalls you, it will not give rise to lust or aversion or anything because you still focus on protecting your mind.
It doesn't fit as well.
Exactly, it's not compatible.
Context. So it's not compatible.
It's not compatible with it.
So it cannot come out of it.
So you can again, like any sutta, basically every sutta is a theme in itself. But that's what I mean. Like theme is not something you can just sort of. Well, you can particularize the theme of something, but that particular, those particular actions, particular things will have the meaning only on the basis of that general theme. It's not other way around. So, really, the practice would come down, instead of conceptualizing things, you should be contextualizing them. You should be looking at the context behind your action, not behind what is like on a molecular level, I'm moving my hand. No. Why am I? What is the reason? What is my motivation for moving my hand? Oh, I want more food. Am I hungry? Is it for desire and lust? What is the purpose of it? That's where you find the context, not in this like sort of fully focused absorption into one moment. No. That moment is already the result of the context that you're clearly not seeing because you're looking in the opposite direction. So the one-pointedness of mind is one-pointedness of the unchangeable context that endures despite of all these particular actions that are coming and going. Not one-pointedness of I'm so one-pointed, no other points exist for me, which is usually how people take meditation to be. But you could see, like if you wonder, well, which one is better, well, ask yourself, which one's more likely to result in wisdom? And what is wisdom? Like say you go to a wise man, or many wise men, and what would be in common to all of them? Like you ask them with different problems. What would be in common is that they have greater perspective. That's where you go to ask for an advice. Because you're going to get a better perspective because you are locked onto the particular problem you have. And that's a definition of wisdom, development of perspective. And what is perspective other than greater context? You have a more particular context, but then you have the fundamental universal context of impermanence, context of non-ownership, context of suffering, context of not self. Fundamental, universal, included in everything possible that has a nature of being manifested. It's as broad, as general, as universal as that. So developing the context means developing perspective on things. Developing perspective is nothing other than developing wisdom. And that's what I mean. You ask yourself, so will this practice of developing context more likely result in wisdom, or practice of developing one pointedness on a particular thing and not give rise to anything else? And you don't really need to look far for the answer. It's already implied and obvious.
I might have said this before. I remember people asking, I want to become a monk, and so on. And then, how should I do it? Should I go about this? And what's the best thing to do? Where exactly should I do it? And so on. But the thing is, you have to get that theme of renunciation, get that idea of renunciation and hold it there. Yeah. Don't do anything unwholesome. Do what is wholesome. And just do that. Then it doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about which monastery should I go to, what country should I go to practice. You will be practicing, and your life will.
You realize then that circumstances of your practice are exactly that, circumstantial. Oh, they are contributing towards the context I'm trying to develop, or they are a bit too incompatible. If you're like ordained in some crowded, constantly busy temple. But that will become apparent if you've invested, like clarifying the context of what you want to do, what you want to develop. That's what the Buddha meant. He goes and listens to wise men, he hears the advice, then he measures the task. I said it many times. That's something people always overlook. Measuring the task means understanding what needs to be done. And when you know what needs to be done, you will have inspiration to do it as well. But most people don't really know what needs to be done. So they end up doing everything and nothing. Because they have no criteria as in what works, what doesn't. But yes, even just being a monk, wearing a robe, it's already a context. That's why back in the day when the order started, they had no rules. There were no rules. Because everybody, understanding Dhamma means they understood the context. Means they already had that basis of wisdom, which means they would not do anything incompatible. So they were going Pindapad at night, eating in the afternoon, because none of that was an issue. But it's when context started declining. So then when new people would come and hear the Dhamma, they wouldn't get the same level of context. They wouldn't have the same perspective on it. And then they would do things that are directly contrary to the practice of Dhamma, out of desire, out of aversion, out of distraction and delusion. And that's where the rules started sort of evolving. Okay, don't do this, don't do this. But in the beginning there was nothing. Because there was no need for anything.
So trust, that's what I wanted to say, as well as trust in the context.
Yes, but you can only have trust in the context if you at least have a degree of some discernment of what the context is.
For example, like if you trust in the context of sensuality, you can be guaranteed you'll be going down the sensual path. Don't worry about it.
Sure. Yeah, or if you don't even have to like define trust. You can more like just welcome the context of sensuality. Just not question the context of sensuality. Take it for granted. Because sensuality, ill will, distraction are basically context that go with the grain of your behavior. In other words, for somebody who is affected with ignorance, those contexts are effortless. Those contexts are default. So that's why initially you have to go against the grain and discern the greater context and start seeing the benefit in the context of restraint, context of non-ill will, context of loving kindness, and so on.
Right, so those are default.
Those are default. They're effortless. Yeah. So if you don't have the right context, you're automatically in the wrong context.
But there is a context, and you should be aware of it.
Absolutely. That's why you're always responsible for your actions. You always are. That's why the mind comes first, because the context is the basis for any action, any significance, any meaning within it.
So again, on the context,
the theme of the context.
Context. The example I gave the other day, as I was in the forest, what I needed what I wanted to have was a chair. So I didn't have a specific chair in mind, armrest, 4 legs or whatever. I just wanted this general resting place chair, something I could rest my back. So I had this image in my mind of a general chair, nothing specific. And I have that image in the background, in my mind, just there. And I have the intention that that's what I want. It's clear to me what I want. I have to feel the chair.
But you're not actively thinking chair and armrest. No, you just had the purpose of the chair at the back of your mind.
Very clear. Almost felt.
Yeah.
I'm not measuring now the places where I could sit and then leveling ground, or which is the levelest ground to sit on, whatever. I just have that image, background image, that background sign, with the intention working, and then my body's moving. Because when there's an intention, I want chair, make chair. Yeah. The body's moving, the eyes are scanning. I'm looking at everything.
That's how all the particular acts become intelligible from the greater perspective of the context. That's why the mind is the forerunner of all things. No, because mind mystically emerges somewhere else down the horizon. No, it's because right there and then, while you're thinking that, the significance of your thoughts, your particular actions are already directed by the mind, by the context. So you can have particular context, practical context, context rooted in this, context rooted in that. But fundamentally, if you start developing wisdom, you're going to start discerning the universal context. And that's the most universal context is suffering and being freedom from it. That's your goal, that's your purpose, that's your practical dedication. To free myself from suffering once and for all.
And your body then
becomes a tool, as it always is actually. Even like when you are careless, fully engaged in sensuality or ill will, your body can only be a tool for your expression. Well, for the belief of your expression, pretty much.
But so, just an example of this practical chair example. So my body's moving, and I can see. I'm mindful of my eyes scanning and picking things out. And there's a rock. Move the rock. Da, da, da. And within moments, a perfect chair is created without much particular thoughts on measurements,
exactly,
no measurements, nothing. Chair gets created.
Because you had the purpose peripherally, and that kept everything within those brackets of that significance. So whatever came through the brackets of practical purpose of being seated down and resting my back. And the clearer the peripheral purpose, theme, context is, more accurately, more efficiently you would find the corresponding thing.
And once those things, that sign has been met, once that goal has been met, in that general sense, the action stops. I don't now start polishing stones and making little engravings on the armchair, because that's not the point.
Yeah, that wasn't the point. Yeah.
The point.
You have to lose perspective in order to get to engage on that level. Yeah. And again, what would be the ultimate, one of the most fundamental contexts that is always implied in your life, in your actions, in your particular feelings, perceptions, so on? It's death. It's Marananusati. So while we are sitting here talking, at the back of my mind is the context of death. I will die. Maybe next moment, maybe in 10 years' time, doesn't matter, but that context is always there. Yeah. So whatever you choose to do, you have context of cessation implied in it, if you discern that context. That's why you practice relinquishment, cessation, as the Buddha would encourage people. Not by throwing away your particular things as, see, I relinquished it. No. Relinquishing basically your experience on the basis of being susceptible to death at any given time. Yeah. That's a context that's already in it. The fundamental perspective.
Yeah. You're talking about, because say I don't want to die, but so as like I want a chair.
Yeah, well that's what I mean. The chair was on a more particular level. It was depending on your body, your needs, and so on. Your significance was implied by all these other things. But it's the same principle. Whereby you want to take it to the point of where you have no say about the context. You have no say about impermanence. You have no say about death, sickness, aging and death. You have no say in that. That's why those are the universals, as the Buddha described them. Things that are universal in every experience, regardless of your particular context, particular wisdom, particular sort of actions and inclinations. These are things in common to all beings, basically. Even if you're not aware of it, those principles remain the same. That's why the Buddha didn't invent the Dhamma, he rediscovered it. So the context you want to be dwelling on, if you want liberation, is the context of cessation. Because why? Context of cessation is incompatible with maintenance of ownership of things that come on the account of your experience. If your experience is liable to death, anything that comes through your experience cannot be appropriated in the same manner as if you were to forget that you are liable to death. So ownership, appropriation, this is mine, this is for me, is incompatible with I will die. That's why people who engage their whole life with following the ownership and desires and sensuality are terrified at the slightest implication of death, because it fully contradicts their being that they've been nurturing and developing, being in the context of sensuality, proliferation, and assumption of life. So that's why you don't have to go and undo your particular ownership if you do Marananusati properly. You will disown your very senses. Yeah, because you value Marananusati, you value the contemplation of death, clarification of the theme of death, inevitable, guaranteed cessation, which means everything that's incompatible with it, you will be abandoning. And that's again the simile, you heat up the pan, whatever water falls on it, it will dry. You're not getting rid of the particular drops. Just maintain the heat on the pan and nothing can stay on it. Same with fire. Maintain the fire and don't worry what's thrown into the fire, because it will burn.
So the level I'm talking about as well is the chair level, practical level. So someone doesn't want to develop liberation and so on. So on a worldly level, if you want to develop anything,
any skill, any wisdom, any knowledge, any recognition of the principle, any invention, requires that greater perspective. Requires that stepping back. Because if all you see is what's in front of you, you're never going to see beyond it. And purpose of what's in front of you is already beyond it in a way. Like the chair doesn't contain you sitting on it. You being seated on the chair comfortably, it's implied when you're not seated in the chair. So the purpose of the thing you are trying to examine is absent to that thing. Present simultaneously with the thing, but present as a form of absence, because you're not actually, as you said yourself, while you were looking for something to emulate a chair to serve the purpose that you wanted, it was there in the mind, and you were doing all these actions that were being directed by that purpose, by that context. Once you sat, it was gone. You fulfilled the purpose. The mind, another thing has arisen, another mood, another direction, another context. But obviously, that's what I mean, it was a more particular type of theme. But if you develop these themes that depend on being alive, theme of impermanence, theme of Marananusati, theme of loving kindness, basically depends for as long as there is mind, as long as there are 5 aggregates. Those themes will stay effortlessly for as long as the 5 aggregates remain.
But remember that you were saying about like geniuses. So someone's got this idea of a musical, a symphony, and then they have that idea, they hold that in there, and it comes out.
And then people who don't have the idea, they try to reverse engineer it through emulating these particular notes.
I'll learn the guitar, whatever.
But the true genius or wisdom or any form of knowledge comes from that having the greater perspective maintained in regard to particular things you're doing. Because often people would lose perspective once they start doing things. And that's like one of the main characteristic of that is sensuality. Sorry, that is the main characteristic of sensuality. That's why sensuality is so bound with ignorance. Because as soon as you engage with sensuality, you pretty much forget about your desire of sensuality, which is why also people regard sensuality as a way of satisfying your desire, which, as we discussed before, it's impossible. Desire is on the level of the mind. Where can sensuality be manifested? On the level of body and bodily actions, which means you need magical belief that this corresponds to that, as in, these actions will enable me to turn a blind eye to still present desire in my mind. That's why you can never satisfy your desires, and even people who never made the effort to abandon desires knows that deep down inside. The desires cannot be satisfied.
You're maintaining the context
by losing the sight of it and going elsewhere looking for a solution. Apples and oranges.
Yeah. So no matter how far your body goes and what it does, it maintains the concept of desire for...
And the more you ignore the context of desire, the more power starts to exert over you. That's why the fever of sensuality grows, the more you engage with it.
So that's, again, you can look at someone who's acting or doing something sensual, say sexual intercourse, and you can know for sure that that background
everything
theme
particularly is
because
is fueled by the background theme. You remove the background theme, all these particular things become meaningless, even quite repulsive. Same with food. Like if you're really, really hungry, hunger overwhelmed your mind, and then you're just shoving things down your mouth, just like a wild animal. Because you completely lost the sight of the context, but the context is so powerful, influencing your behavior. That's why you want to be undoing the contexts, the themes of lust, the themes of ill will, resistance, the themes of carelessness, distraction. And you can't undo them mechanically. Oh, if you walk like this, talk like this, sit like this, everything, any unwholesome theme will be uprooted from you. No, how can that be? Because all of those efforts are aimed at the particular modes of behavior that are already secondary to any theme that's presently enduring. But if I teach you how to discern the theme, and you see it for yourself, you don't need to worry about how you sit, how you walk, how you talk. Because you uprooted the basis of desire for those manifestations.
The mind is dragging everything with it, so to speak. So make sure that vehicle is clean.
See, when I say you have to discern the theme in order to develop it, one of the prerequisites for developing the right view is discern the mind. Which means most people, Buddha-janas, can't even discern the mind as a phenomenon, as a basic context. All they can see what's in front of it. Yet, whatever's in front of it, it's meaningful because of the peripheral, because of that background, because of that context. But that's completely invisible to them. Yeah, so that's why I said, like, if you stop investing so much effort in conceptualizing, in trying to like informationally sort of clarify out of this particular movements and what you should do, and start looking at the context of the very action of you conceptualizing things right there and then. That's why, like, come back to the present moment. Don't just come back to the mystical, vague present moment, but discern the present context that takes you away from the present moment, as in distracts you from it. You are in the present moment whether you want it to be or not. It's not optional. So you want to discern the context that endures then, regardless of where your mind goes. You want to find universal basis for it.
It also frees you from it.
Yeah, so you and also it kind of, it's more ambiguous, it's harder to discern, but actually in the long run it's easier to do. Because it's not as futile as just chasing concepts and staying with like particularized aspects of things. Oh, I'm breathing in like this, I'm breathing in like that, I'm moving in like this, I speak slowly, I do this, I'm controlling. No, look at the context. Look at the significance of all these particular acts. You become aware of that, you're automatically aware of all these particular things. So if you're aware of if you don't lose the context, for example, that gives reason to you eating food today, means you won't be eating food carelessly. What is the context for eating food in your present situation? Oh, it's for sustenance of the body, removing the hunger, but not overdoing it, not giving rise to sensuality. That's the context. But if you think that context will be found in you chewing food like 3 times per 10 seconds, and then I will swallow slowly, and then I will look up when I put food in my mouth so I don't see what I'm putting in my mouth, all that means you don't know where the problem is. The problem is not how you eat the food or what you eat. The problem is your reason for eating is rooted in lust or aversion or whatever, delusion, or all of it. But if you maintain the context, the reason why you eat food, you'll know exactly when to stop, and you wouldn't care what you eat. If it's agreeable, agreeable. If it's disagreeable, you won't be sad about it either.
It's like it's free from duty and virtue.
Sure.
Isn't it?
Sure. Yeah.
You go beyond that.
Go beyond that. Yeah. That's like the first fetter that falls off once you start developing context properly. Like, I must be doing this. No.
But you see it's
there's nothing you must be doing in a way. Because if there are certain things you must be doing that will automatically result in Nibbana, then the Buddha would have said so. He would have said that action, particular action, will result in liberation. But no, he said that any action results in more action. Good action is better than bad action, but it's still action. Which means you can't step outside of the domain of action while you keep performing action. So first you replace bad action with good action, but then you want to develop the universal context, theme, of non-lust, non-aversion, non-distraction towards any action. And that's how you free yourself from virtue and duty, from expression of lust, aversion, delusion, all of it. That's how you become an Arahant. Arahant has the ultimate imperturbable context of impermanence that has saturated him thoroughly. There is nothing that he can ever appropriate again regarding mind. You want to develop the principle, and you will see it working because you will be unable to suffer amid suffering. So how can you not suffer amidst the particular suffering? Because it's the context that gives suffering, not particular things that give suffering to the context. If suffering were truly coming from external things, particular things, you wouldn't be able to free yourself from it. That's why Arahant, who has freed himself fundamentally from the context of suffering, he says, oh, the only disturbance that is left is on account of these 5 aggregates, but even that will go when the body breaks apart. So he doesn't refer to only suffering that's left. No, it's disturbance that's left. All this annoyance that's left is on the... But for Putujana, annoyance is suffering, because he hasn't developed the context that frees him from suffering, fundamentally. And then he can't suffer amidst all these things that used to kind of reverse, so to speak, that order, whereby instead of realizing the suffering comes from your mind, it's your craving in your mind in regard to the circumstances that's making you suffer. Not having that perspective, not having the Four Noble Truths, you would then think that these particular things, that's why you suffer. That's why there is suffering in my mind, because this happened that I didn't want to happen. Whatever happens, that's not the root for suffering. The root of suffering is craving in your mind in regard to whatever happens. And craving, in a way, it's already a form of context that people are unaware of. You are unaware of that it's you who induces suffering by wanting more of pleasure or less of displeasure, or wanting to just ignore the neutral. That's on the level of the mind.
So a person who gets the idea, I want to be free from suffering.
Yeah.
So getting that idea, what is it, is very important. What is it supposed to be like?
Yeah, obviously you need, for such a universal context, you need Buddha's instruction. Because if you find your way out of suffering by yourself, well, you would be either Sammasambuddha or Pacceka Buddha. But good news is you don't have to find it by yourself, because Dhamma is still out there. But you want to see that suffering, nobody says you deserve what comes your way in terms of circumstances. No. It has nothing to do with it. But you suffering on account of whatever comes your way in regard to circumstances, that's on you. Suffering is your own doing, and because of that you can actually free yourself. To the point where the Buddha said himself, even if the highway robbers pin you down and start sawing your limbs one by one savagely, you won't have ill will towards them, because you won't be suffering on account of it. It's going to be extreme disturbance, extremely disagreeable, but it cannot reverse that order and take over the context of the mind that has been liberated from it. It's impossible.
The pressure.
No amount of pressure of disagreeable can induce craving to get rid of it, because craving always comes from the mind. And if you have relinquished the ownership of that mind, what is there to resist? What is there to defend? What is there to crave against? Nothing.